There's nowhere else in the world like Montauk. You know, you get the point, there's that sign there, surf casting capital of the world, and it's true.
It's not just good spots, it's seriously larger numbers of fish and bigger fish go by Montauk than anywhere else.
There's too many damn people around here. That's not too many people. Too many fishermen.
I don't know, you go down the hill coming into Montauk, going down that last hill, coming into town, things change. You know, your whole head's like in another place, you know. Any problems you got forgets, you know, and your whole mind is onto the fishing and just being there.
The people that fit in Montauk are the pure eccentrics. Montauk is one of the places in the world where eccentrics gather. In you go, baby. In you go. It was once explained to me that places that are the ends of the earth.
I think those boats are too close, Dominic.
Distant and faraway places attract crazy people.
Fire! Now we wait for a fish. Montauk, the land of the giants.
So that's how he gets his
Thank you, thank you. Thank you all.
Grab that one. Hold that up. I want to get a shot of you.
Yeah, sure.
Holy shit.
One night I was out here, 30 feet out, fishing, and, you know, when you get these fish, you don't want to keep walking back to shore and getting them off, so you deal with it out there. And it was about a 20-pound fish, and put the fishing rod under my arm. I got the leader. I grabbed the plug and grabbed the fish, and he twisted, and the hook went into my hand. And I'm like, holy shit, what do I do now? So, tiptoe back up on shore. Luckily, there was a guy here, actually. It was in a truck. And I asked him for a hand, and he starts clapping.
Perched on the east end of New York's Long Island, Montauk is widely known as the surf casting capital of the world. As home to the largest fish ever landed on rod and reel, a 3,427-pound great white shark, landed by angler Donnie Braddock and legendary Montauk captain Frank Mundus, it may rightly lay claim to the unqualified title, sport fishing capital of the world. Every autumn, two parallel migrations collide on the east end of Long Island. Hordes of eager anglers from around the world flock to Montauk's rocky shores and sandy beaches. They time their terrestrial migration to intercept the massive marine migrations of striped bass and bluefish which stream down from the north, passing Montauk en route to their wintering grounds. Sheer numbers of fish will satisfy some anglers, while others will not rest until they've landed their trophy striper, commonly known as a cow, the catch of a lifetime.
I dream about these things, it's actually happened. It's happened to me. I went up to him and what did I say to you? I just put my hand on your shoulder. I said, I just caught the fish of a life. I knew it was a fish of a lifetime. Chances of that happening again or bigger was just, well.
First mapped in 1614 by Dutch explorer Adrian Block and initially named Fisher's Point, Montauk is the easternmost point in New York State. Home to the Montauket Indians for more than 3 millennia, this stormy outpost remained almost completely undeveloped through the 17th and 18th centuries, with the exception of the construction of Montauk Point Lighthouse, authorized by the Second U.S. Congress under President George Washington in 1792, making it the first public works project undertaken in the United States of America. Whaling and cattle ranching became the East End's cash industries, but fishing remained an important source of subsistence for the few remaining natives and the early European settlers. In 1895, developer Austin Corbin Jr. pushed the railroad east across Long Island from New York City in hopes of developing Montauk as a deepwater passenger terminal. The passenger terminal concept never took off, but within a few years, daily trainloads of striped bass, bluefish, cod, herring, and more were departing Montauk Station on Fort Pond Bay for the seemingly inexhaustible markets of Manhattan. Montauk's reputation as a commercial fishing port grew and attracted a hardy mix of fishermen from across Long Island and as far away as Nova Scotia. The fishermen and their families settled around the shores of Fort Pond Bay, building their shacks, docks, and processing facilities within easy reach of the railroad terminal. In 1901, a monumental catch signaled a change of direction for Montauk's fishermen. Fishing under the light at Montauk Point, angler William Morgan hooked and landed one of the largest striped bass ever taken on rod and reel. Tipping the scales at a massive 76 pounds, the monster fish made headlines throughout both the commercial and sport fishing communities, forever associating the name Montauk with trophy striped bass fishing. After the end of the Second World War, the increase in the working man's leisure time saw an increase in leisure activities, and fishing became increasingly popular. The Long Island Railroad laid on a train known as a Fisherman's Special to transport anglers from New York City and Brooklyn to and from Montauk. The return train was even equipped with a special ice car to keep the catch fresh for the journey home.
I believe it was 1944. My father got me up in the middle of the night, and I went with my grandfather, and we went to Atlantic Avenue and caught the Long Island Railroad. God knows what time it was. It had to be probably around 1 o'clock in the morning. And at daylight, it was just making light. I remember coming over the Napeague stretch. Now I know what it was. And the sparks were flying out of the train. I thought the bushes were going to go on fire. And then we pulled into Montauk, and at that time, the train went to where the party boats are. And I remember vividly how everybody was jumping off and running, as the train was still moving, jumping off and running to the boats. And the rods were tied up at the boats, waiting for them. And we fished the surf that day. It was quite an experience. I was very young then. I had to be like 5, 6 years old. And I remember eating my father's and grandfather's lunch. I was a big eater then. And they had no food.
Despite its growing reputation as a fishing destination and its proximity to both New York City's ever-growing population and the world-famous Millionaire's Playground at the Hamptons, just 10 miles back west, Montauk still manages to retain a frontier-like feel. It's commonly referred to as the end, although some also refer to it as the beginning.
It just has so much inertia as a fishing town, it'll never really ever evolve into anything else. It can't. I don't think we'll ever see it, like the Hamptons per se, but and I think maybe Main Street is just too short. Maybe that's it. Maybe there's just not enough Main Street to make it that. But I'm glad it's not, and so we'll just hope it just stays the way it stays, and the fishing stays as good as it always is.
As late as the 1970s, Montauk was the kind of seasonal town that rolled up the sidewalks in fall, not bringing them out again until the following spring. In 1938, the weather very kindly did it for them.
In 1938, the fishing village was over in Fort Pond Bay. In the hurricane, all the fishing sheds and the shanties and the stores that were there to support the fishing, all the debris ended up right by the circle. The townspeople said, if we have another hurricane, it's going to just destroy the place again. So they said, this is where all the debris ended up. This is where we'll build the town, because this is obviously the high water mark.
It's probably the first year we went out there, did a surf cast for a week, probably in the mid-'80s. There was not a sniff of any Hampton-like, influence in Montauk at that time. In fact, we were having breakfast at on the corner, and you'd never see that today. But right in the middle of the dining room while we're eating our eggs and bacon, there was a dog sitting right in the middle of the dining room, licking himself. It sounded like the soundtrack of a cheesy porno movie. Just all you heard while we're eating your breakfast.
Montauk is the Hamptons, but it's the bastard child of the Hamptons. Montauk will always be the little outcast. The hoi polloi and the well-to-do have always been coming out here, but they've never really put a foothold because they've never been able to understand the personalities of the local people.
You know, you think it's, you know, stereotypical fishing. Oh, we're gonna go relax, we're gonna go fishing, and then now you have Montauk, and then you have, you know, guys that look like they just got out of prison, you know, in a wetsuit, you know, slinging an eel, and it's you know, somehow it just doesn't fit because that's the kind of fishing it is, and yeah, it's hardcore and it's rough and tumble.
Absolutely nothing, as far as I've ever heard in the entire world, that compares to blitzing stripers underneath the lighthouse. Obviously, you know, it's a mecca for a reason. It's not just good spots. It's seriously larger numbers of fish and bigger fish go by Montauk than anywhere else. Every single striped bass gets funneled between here and Block Island. So without fail, you're just gonna see things that just, and I guess that's really what it is you see things in Montauk that you don't see anywhere else. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah, I don't think a hook will go in these hands. Let's do a demonstration. It's real tough. I could probably run it through there. There, we got a hook in the hand. Now what are we gonna do? You wanna pull it out or what? Wanna go past the barb? We're past the barb. That one almost went in twice. No bluefish need to do that. Yeah, they heard them hooks. That's why them bluefish look like this when they go in, because I don't want them in my hands. I know people have got them in. I seen Michelson one day catch a bass, and he's kneeling down on it, and he's calling me out of the water, and he goes, come here, Toad, come here. And I go, how big is the fish? He goes, no. Cut the hook. It literally went, a treble hook literally went in here and came out like that, and the whole thing was embedded in his hand, a treble hook, and he's kneeling on the fish. It's like an 18, 20-pound fish. So I had to cut the hook off, and then he pulls it through, and he went right back out fishing.
During the summer months, Montauk is much like any other seaside town. Sunbathers in search of a trophy melanoma take over the beaches from anglers in search of a trophy fish. And the area's legendary surf hosts a different type of thrill seeker. Out where the giants swim, the shark and tuna action is in full swing. While down in Montauk's marinas, the charter and party boats line their rails with eager summer anglers, each in search of their piece of the ocean's bounty. As the year ages and both the leaves and the mercury begin to fall, and those who came east to be seen start to head back west, the beaches, rocks and coves, which make up Montauk's coastline, once again become the territory of Montauk surfcasters. They arrive in droves, transforming Montauk and extending its busy season far beyond the reach of any ordinary beach town.
Poor little thing, we'll set him free.
And when the waters and the air start to cool and both start to boil with life, this is peak season for surfcasters.
I used to walk down from school every day, right in the fall time, go right down to the beach, do the bluefish runs in the summer, because we had these kids that lived in back of us. I forget their name. There was about 4 of them, and they were into surf casting, and they would run up and down the beach, bluefish blitz, and everybody'd run down. And back then, All the bluefish were like 12, 15 pounds. All I ever did was fish, 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 nothing else. And it kind of, you know, my mother fished her whole life. I guess it was just kind of in the blood, you know?
The first time I fished Montauk was probably about 1975. I was about 13 years old, and that was the first experience out there. Just never forget it. But it wasn't until the mid-'80s where I really started surf fishing out there, you know, regularly, and it's been, you know, spectacular ever since.
My dad was really got the 3 kids involved, my 2 brothers and I, and he would take us out every weekend to come fish Montauk. And back then, Montauk was a lawless place. We used to come out and camp right up in there. There was a little cut between the dunes, and we would camp there as a family and fish, you know, 2 night tides. It was a blast.
I met some of the crazier people out here whose parents had been out here fishing, and I got involved with the fishing community, and just the whole concept of staying up all night and fishing, and, you know, carrying on, lighting a campfire, sit around telling stories, maybe have a couple of beers. You know, get away from the old lady. My wife, you know, you've heard of golf widows. My wife is a surf widow, fishing widow.
I married my wife at Gurney's in Montauk, and we spent our honeymoon fishing for a week. My wife knew exactly what she stepped in, okay? And I have to remind her that on occasion, okay? She knew that when the fish show up, I'm gonna go.
I fished at Jones Beach, and I fished, you know, back west and, you know, North Shore, South Shore, and even took trips down to Hatteras, and nothing's like Montauk. It's just the whole idea that, you know, you're sneaking out in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., and I'm not looking to get 10, 20, 30 small fish. I'm looking for that big fish. So it's like hunting, you know, getting your gear, jumping in a wetsuit, and, you know, just walking out on your own and seeing if you could land that one fish.
Give me a nice smile. There you go. One more. Drop it slightly. Good show.
They call it the largest biomass movement on Earth, that migration of fish that come down from the north and stream past Montauk. So you have a tremendous fishery. And no matter where I travel, and I have a great opportunity to travel many places to fish, there's nothing like suiting up and getting wet and fishing Montauk.
The sport fish for surfcasters out here are striped bass and bluefish, but it's really the striped bass that we're all after. They're a more canny fish. They grow larger. We're all looking for the big trophy fish. They're a migratory fish, and Montauk Point is sort of a cornerstone where these fish have to turn, and they stop over for a while in the fall. And for surfcasters and boaters, it becomes Mecca for striped bass fishermen.
All fall long, we watch the weather to see what's coming up the coast, waiting for that nor'easter that's going to clobber the point. Days before, we wait in anticipation for these things to roll up. There you are in the teeth of a storm. You pull down onto the beach in the morning. The waves are throwing foam up onto the beach. The sand is blowing around the beach so hard that it literally scratches your windshield. By the end of the day, it looks like somebody scrubbed your car with sandpaper. And you going out into this thing, especially when it's cold, is is really quite a unique experience.
My wife, she asked me, she said, when are you gonna leave Montauk? I said, I can't leave. I said, I was basically brought up here from when I was 10 years old, and 43 years. And it's got everything. I have a business, you know, and the fishing's great. I love the fishing.
Hey, Richie, what's up? Bunch of googans out tonight, boys. Bunch of googans out tonight.
So, but there's just something about it, you know. I mean, I go to Florida. I couldn't live in Florida. It's great, trust me. For 2 months, Montauk's great. January and February to get out of here, you know. And because I go down here to fish. But other than that, you know, I got to come back. I come back and, you know, I got work and I get to go fishing.
As late as the 1990s, working and fishing were often synonymous on Montauk's rocks and beaches. Striped bass have long been targets of both commercial and recreational fisheries, and for centuries, shore-based whole seining for striped bass on the east end of Long Island had been a way of life for local baymen.
I would go down there all the time. Every day they would be there every day after school because there was no laws, there were no limits, unlimited. And in the fall run, they would have 3 or 4 dories, and I think the nets, they go probably, I don't know, a mile down. They go a mile down the beach from one side to the next. I don't know how many feet out, maybe 300 yards. They'd run the boat, and they'd have 5 or 6 trucks, and they would run around the school of fish. And some days they would come back with 2 or 3 truckloads, and then some days they would set a net, and I would be like, what are you gonna do with all these fish? They didn't have enough trucks on the beach.
Say you fished from 3 o'clock in the morning till it got light. You didn't have a touch. Maybe there was some fish there the day before or whatever. You didn't have a touch. The whole seiners would come down, flat ocean now in the morning, no wind or nothing, just looked like a big pond. They'd come down, you'd see them ride down the beach, and they'd stop and they'd just look and look. They were good, those guys. There was only a few crews. And all of a sudden, they'd set that boat out, and flat ocean, no birds, no breaks, no nothing. After they decided on when they put that net out, they'd come in with thousands of pounds of fish. They had pickup trucks with plywood sides going up, and they'd fill them with stripers. There was no limits then.
I remember times where, you know, they're winching the fish in, and I thought the trucks were gonna flip over because the nets were so full, hundreds of thousands of fish. You know, you're talking fish between 40s and 50 pounds. I mean, I saw fish bigger than me as a kid, just throwing them in the trucks. And the blackfish, the flounder, the sea robins, the skates, just laid on the beach. I mean, I would go down there and get 11-pound blackfish. They just left it on the beach. Yeah, you want to take it? We don't want it. I come home, my father goes, where'd you get that? I said, the whole seiners, they didn't want it because they had so much bass and bluefish.
Following a complete moratorium on the catching and selling of stripers in 1985, and subsequent legislative changes, which were pushed for by the recreational anglers of the time, and which effectively ended shore-based commercial striped bass fishing in New York, the whole seiners are now largely gone from the East End's beaches. During their time, however, conflicts were not uncommon between the commercial and recreational fishing groups, as both competed for the same resource.
We were having problems with their baitmans, I mean, big time.
They would come down and lay nets in key areas, you know. When they laid the nets, you couldn't fish anymore.
Well, there was a small group of guys. I went out there and did something. You would tie a rope to the net, and they pull it in. They pulled the net all the way in, and they threw gasoline on it and burnt it. There was bounty money put on the guys of $500. There wasn't no happy times with their gill netters and the baymans.
But back then, the line between commercial and recreational fishermen was a very fine one. With no licenses required on either side, many recreational anglers took to selling their stripers, putting them in direct competition with the local netters.
The old-timers they're phenomenal. They're crazier than all of us put together. Because, you know, they used to do it for the money. They used to go on these busman's holidays where they would come out here with $1 in their pocket and go home with $1,000 by selling fish. Vito Orlando, Jack Yee, Joe Bragan, they used to catch hundreds of pounds of fish a day. They used to line them up. You can see pictures of them in the old books of striped bass lined up, maybe 200 pounds of fish laying on the beach, just from one catch.
Back when the fort wasn't open, and I had gone down that night, almost 4 hours of big fish. Ended up with 18 bass that were total weight when I shipped them the next day were 560 pounds. I had 8 fish in the 40s, and biggest fish was 54.14. I had to carry all those fish up from the Point Rock and Browns up the cliff and put them on top. Then I had to walk them all the way to the gate, which is quite a walk. Thank God I was a young man then and not an old person like I am now. But it was just an unbelievable night, all on a redfin, all on a blueback redfin. But I was exhausted. I had him on the front seat of the truck. I had him in the back of the camper. I had him in the fish box. It was just crazy. It was just really nuts.
How much did you get for that?
Only $1.25 a pound, so back then. But so I made over like $600. Paid for my plugs and some gas to go back and forth to Montauk. But it was an incredible night. It was just amazing, you know.
Johnny Englishman had a little less than, I think, somewhere around 600 pounds in 2 nights when we could sell them. One guy on Darters. You're talking catching some fish. Because I remember we sold them to a little restaurant out there, and it was 700 and some odd pounds, and I fished with him 2 nights. He was there a couple of nights. They were all nice fish. 30-pounders, a couple of 40s in there, you know.
It's not uncommon today to be able to catch that many fish, but we're only allowed to keep 1 fish. Actually, you're allowed to keep 2 fish, but that's another story. I'd prefer we don't keep any, except, of course, for the world record fish, which I thoroughly intend to keep. Because that's one of the greatest feelings in life, to take that big fish and to show it off. I think it's even better than catching the darn things. Just to see the look on their faces when you say, hey, Joe, come on, look in the back of my truck, look at this. And he says, oh no, what do you got? And he looks down and goes, Jesus, where did that come from?
I was 14, went down to, God, it was the north side, and as I was coming down, it's one of my first times on the north side of Montauk Point, saw somebody carrying a fish, one of the old salts. And, you know, I'm 14 years old, so I asked him, I said, where did you get the fish? Where did you catch it on? He looks at me and goes, where did I get it? I got it in the water.
That's rookie stuff, asking a guy, where'd you get it? Well, guys didn't go around broadcasting what they did. Guys would come over, nobody lied to him. How'd you do? Yeah, we did okay, that's all. And you wouldn't poke into no more because I ain't gonna tell you no more. So don't ask, and I ain't gonna ask you. You know, you do yours and we do ours. And that's the way it was, you know. And in the 70s and 80s, you were still getting $2 or $3 a pound for them. So there was some money involved in it, too. Now, today, you turn the computer on, you find out every fish that was caught, you know. Guys have got to walk so far from the fort going west to try to get away from people, you know. And now you can't, you walk, you know, all those different spots. There's other guys there already, you know, so it's hard to get away from anybody now because somebody opens their mouth. I got a few fish there last night.
There's no more secret spots in Montauk.
Actually, there is one place, but I can't say it on film. The guys will kill me if I tell you that. Yeah, they'll kill me.
There aren't no secret spots. Everybody knows. But and I think that's what it really boils down to. Is it's not a secret spot. It's having a spot to yourself.
It used to be if you came out here and you found fish, you didn't go back and tell anybody. I mean, there were times you would go to the parking lot, somebody would be on the phone, and somebody would just cut the phone cord right off so nobody could call anybody to tell them that there was fish out here.
Night that I caught my big fish, it was me and John Hatch, and we used to call him Dennis, the red truck, I can't think of his name. Steve Benet. Me and John were there first, and I had the fish, and these guys came along. There was nobody there. And the next night, not that they said anything, it was just one of them things. The next night it was packed with guys. And it just gets around. I guess the little few people we told us I had to let that fish go. So it wasn't that anybody saw it, but it was mobbed, you know, the next night.
The problem is that a lot of spots don't fish that many people. You know, we're talking fish, you're surf casting. Short of it being rough out, it's shallow water. Fish, even if they're going gung-ho, are gonna be spooky. It's more about keeping a bite to yourself. It's about, if you find a pot of fish, you don't tell anybody. You'll tell them a week later, because a week later it doesn't matter.
In the early days, as I said, you know, there were hardly any people out there. And all of a sudden at, 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd be fishing and I'd see a light along the shore coming down. And that used to really upset me. And when I say upset me, I mean, it's free territory. It's open to everybody. But I was afraid that they'd see where I am. So as the light got closer, I'd slide off my rock and I'd just hold on to the rock with my hand, hold my pole, and wait for that light to pass on shore so that I would protect the secrecy of my spot.
You either have to walk really far in, late at night, and then you get there and you're like, oh my God, where'd these people come from? How'd they get there? Or they get dropped off by a helicopter? You don't know. So you take your chances. There's certain spots you can fish. I got a couple spots it's convenient for me to go in and walk down, and it's less people. But, when there's a good, like I said, when the fishing's good, yeah, it's tough to find a good spot. And a lot of times, I try not to say anything if I catch fish, because one slip, you tell your friend, hey, do me a favor. I had nice fish last night. Don't say anything. I promise I won't. The next night, there's 30 guys down here. It's like fever. It's like smallpox. There's no stopping it, man. It just comes in and it just wipes you out. And that's the way it is. So now if I go down and I find fish, I don't say nothing. In the fall runs, there's too many people. It gets kind of, my friend Jimmy comes here every fall, he's not coming anymore. He says he can't even get a parking spot at the lighthouse. He says, it's just insane.
There were times that it would be me and 3 other guys that would get in on a good bite, and you'd have that for 2 days or so. Now, with the internet and cell phones, as soon as people start catching fish, it's Armageddon. The whole nature of the East End is changing. So where there were there were open land, you had open spaces out here. Now everything is owned. You have people coming out here that are putting these mansions up that feel like they own that stretch of beach.
People like me and people that grew up here, we don't take defenses very, very well. As a matter of fact, just the other day, I was going down to one of my favorite haunts in a place called the Ranch, and they had put up a huge fence there. And I said to my buddy, well, this just won't do. And we climbed over the fence, and we get down onto the beach trail, and sure enough, there were the Brie and Champagne set sitting there in little settee chairs, quite literally drinking champagne and eating Brie. And we just barged right through them, and you can imagine me, a big bald guy with tattoos all over him, in a wetsuit, going by and saying, hey, you got another glass of champagne? And this guy, oh, how'd you get in here? And I said, well, the same way I've been getting in here for the last 40 years. I walked, bub. And the guy, he started looking like a fish.
People want to be involved in that whole Montauk craziness, but it's also where access to beaches that we used to have has gotten more difficult, and it's because of the sheer volume of people.
As a kid, I used to, every day after school, run down on the old highway by Surfside. Every afternoon, a blitz, every day. There was nobody around. Acres and acres and acres of bass, all over the place. And you look down the beach, and there's like maybe 4 buggies. Now, it's all buggies.
A lot of surf casters are reading reports, they're running out. It's unbelievable. It's shoulder to shoulder. Come September, September 1, first week of October, it's a goddamn madhouse. And, It wasn't like that 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
I started fishing basically back in 1955. You'd be out there, you could be out there all weekend long and maybe see one vehicle on the beach. But nowadays, you know, you're looking at an island that's got 3 million people on it, and it's still got the same amount of room.
You know, it still kind of blows me away where, you know, that you got somebody, you know, taking, you know, money at Camp Hero when they put a, you know, coat of paint on the place. You know, 10 years ago, that was just simply, hey, the old World War II, you know, camp that you just kind of drove in. It was just the ruins. It was the relics. So now they've, maybe I'm definitely exaggerating, but they've sort of Disneyfied Camp Hero a little bit.
Montauk it's a site for everybody to be to. Everybody wants to be there. Everybody loves to go fishing. You know, it's an area you can fish, you can surf, you can swim, you can boat. You know, it's got everything that you want for an outdoor experience. And to have limits put on you like that with a permit fee, or you can't get a permit because you don't live in this town, or you can't buy it because you come from New Jersey and you don't live in New York. You know, it hurts the economy, it hurts the public, and I think it hurts the view of what Montauk is all about.
Just it's so crowded now. That's the whole thing now. It's a tough place to be. And it seems like the fish are there. Or, you know, they're always there and they ain't nowhere else. You know, so everybody gets to Montauk.
On some days, like in the fall run, people know they come out here, especially with the internet now, you know, cell phones, internet. When there's blitzes, people just like to catch fish. And they come right to the beach. It's easy fishing, you know. You don't always need a boat to go out and catch fish here.
You catch a decent fish, they're all fishing, they're all casting right over your line. They cast right in front of you. Because you're catching fish here, that means that's the only spot in the world that they're catching fish. So everybody's got to cast right in front where you're catching fish, which is ruining Montauk today because there's too many damn people around here. That's not too many people. Too many fishermen.
But a lot of people say they're Googans, they don't know. The more time you put in and the more you fish, the better you get.
Yeah, when I got out there, that crew that was out there in the 40s and 50s and that, into the 60s, the late 60s and that, they were the old guys then. And we were the young guys then, you know. They were sort of slowing down, but you didn't bother with them. That's where we had respect them days, where that's not today. You know, if you've seen a guy that was a couple of them old times they were fishing, you didn't go horn in on them or start, you know, tangling them or any of that, you know. You just didn't do things like that, you know. Those days, the late 60s, and that striped bass was almost strictly at night. You just didn't, no matter how much you fished, even the guys with bait didn't catch any during the day, or occasionally a guy'd catch one on worms, occasional. And then all of a sudden around 96 or 97, the bait changed, whatever changed, and the striped bass were in the daytime. There was a lot of bass caught. In fact, we used to sit around all day watching them. Me and Hatch, John Hatch, the guy I fish with, and we'd have a good night tonight. These fish, as soon as it got dark, the fish were gone. I mean, not the first little bit, but, you know, say it got dark at 7, you come out at 10 if the tide was right. There was nothing there for one reason or another, and that's what attracted a lot of guys, because it was easy to catch striped bass. It was easy to catch a striper than it was to catch a winter flounder. You can't catch one of them now, and you can catch 1 million striped bass. You know, they're around in the daytime now, where years ago they weren't. And that's what makes Montauk crazy in September.
I think, you know, in the last 10 years or so, I've probably never seen, more of, the blitzing school fish, and then the advent of, the four-wheel drive. Used to be if you had a four-wheel drive, you pretty much had one because you liked the surf cast. Once that became the rage, that people started, sort of branching out, see what they could do with them. And, and I think that drove it too. So, yeah, it's no question, it's more crowded than it used to be.
And naturally, when they're blitzing like that, it's almost impossible not to catch one. You know what I mean? That's why there's so many people down here and fishing now, because, you put something in there when they're boiling like that, you end up just about snagging something. So, like, right away now you're catching fish, and you're kind of hooked on fishing, which is great. Don't get me wrong about that. I'm just saying that when they're not here and they're not showing, that's the time to fish. And when you're catching fish, then you know what you're doing.
Some of the best fish come out of those rocks in Montauk are when there's absolutely nothing going on. You just get that one or two big fish that chew for 15, 20 minutes a day, and you got to be there at the right time.
Smile! Smile, fuck, it's your birthday!
Along with all those people and the waves and the wind and the rain, then you have to navigate through this maze of fishermen to try and land this fish, because obviously a big fish isn't going to land right in front of you. It wants to move down tide, and it's trying to get away with its life, and you're trying to get it on the beach. I've seen some people like Richie Michelson take out a knife and start cutting lines as he's going past. It always helps to growl at the tourists. They get kind of intimidated by the locals.
Put a bucktail on. I had no pork rind, nothing. I just put the bucktail on and hit the water. It must have been right in front of that fish, boy. He just swallowed it. 2 turns, he come up out of the water with his tail. And when I got him in, the sweep and stuff, everybody was nice. That was nice. Everybody down there on the beach seeing I had a nice fish on. Everybody got out of the water. Everybody got out of the water. And the wave came and the fish landed, and then everybody else went back to fishing. Nowadays, nobody does that.
We were in the camper last night in between tides talking about how the etiquette has changed out here. And we were talking about this one group of guys that I remember under the lighthouse, where if you didn't time your casts out and you crossed one of them, they used to sharpen the inside of their hooks. So that if you crossed them a couple of times, I've seen them change plugs, put it on, and just pop you right off. So you'd end up losing a couple of plugs and either walk away, have a confrontation, or learn real quick.
Montauk's not an easy place to fish. It can be. There's a lot of fish that will come up on the sand certain times of year, but Montauk in general is not a safe place to fish. It's not shouldn't be for beginners, but there's more than enough spots out there to get people into fishing. And then fishing under that point, you gotta have a screw loose. Nor'easter, plowing in, fishing on top of the rocks and trying to go down and land a fish, you're taking your life in your hands.
When you're at the lighthouse, especially when it's big, you can't lose your wits for 2 seconds. And you're sitting there and you're excited and you're in the moment and your rod's screaming. And then it's really special about the lighthouse is then knowing that you can turn to your right or left. And you're sitting there thinking how crazy we are for being here and how insane this whole thing is. And the guy on your left and right are thinking the same thing, and it's that camaraderie. But if you make one misstep when you go to try to get to that next rock to go down, you're sliding 10 feet on slime-covered rocks into who knows what with 10-foot waves crashing in and 4 knots of current. You sit there, you watch the best of the best get the living daylights beaten out of you. And I guess that really boils down to what it's about when you're down there. This is not friendly fishing. This is for people who want to push themselves, knowing that they can and will be pushed by the environment, by the fish that they're chasing. They will mess your head up, they will hurt you, you will break rods, break line, have your heart broken most of the time. But I think that's what it's all about, is the constant danger, the constant excitement, the constant challenge. And I said it before, it is not for the faint of heart. You're gonna get hurt, you're gonna get your heart broken. It happens, it's surf casting.
The worst thing that can happen in fishing under the lighthouse in a storm is that somebody who is inexperienced and an amateur will attempt to fish there under really bad conditions and do crazy things like trying to lift big fish out of the rocks with their pole. You'll watch a pole bend in half like a U, and quite often that the result is a hook in the chin and a trip to the emergency room.
We were fishing under the lighthouse, and with my friend Anthony, couldn't see a thing, couldn't see the hand in front of your face. It was so dark. And all I heard was this absolute thud. I mean, there wasn't a hand to break his fall. He didn't see where he was going. Boy, he went from one rock to the next. That other rock wasn't there, and all I heard was, 200 pounds of guy just splat on, on a rock below. So those things can happen out there.
I've seen guys get picked off from the top of the rocks at the lighthouse and pulled all the way into the sea, where we had to go down there and fish them out of the water. It's quite invigorating.
When there's, 20, 30,000 fish at your feet, 20 feet off the beach, you don't have to be good, because half of these guys you see fishing, some don't know what they're doing, and they come out and they want to learn. They may look like Googans, but they're here to learn. Some watch and learn, and some just never learn. But when there's that many fish, and the bait's all balled up, you can't help but to catch fish. You can't help it. But there's certain times when it's like that, I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want, there's just too many people. Let them have it. Let all them guys who don't know what they're doing go down there and have fun doing it. I'll find a place where, rock hopping, Southside, somewhere, even down to Sand Beach, go down at night and there's basically nobody there. You may not catch a lot, but, you're not mugged, and, you're not getting beat up by the next guy next to you, so.
It's a classic competition for space. I don't think it needs to be this bad. The surfing thing's a bit more of an issue. There's a lot of money in it, that's the thing. Surfing is one of the most popular sports out there right now. Anybody who has a coastline is trying to milk it for all it's worth, and Montauk is definitely down that road right now.
In the same way that word of Montauk's legendary fall-run fishery spread amongst the fishing community, word of its sometimes epic Atlantic waves spread through the surfing community, bringing more people to its already crowded beaches.
Years ago, surfing was like wetsuiting in Montauk. There were only a few hardy souls who were doing it, a few locals who did it. You did not have the hordes coming out. It was somewhat secretive. And then, I really don't know what it was, but it has blown up around here. I mean, you've got people from Europe, from New York City, from New Jersey, and it seems every single one of them's coming to Montauk.
No surfers, not at all. That's only came in the last few years. They'd be down ditch plains. that's where they were, and they didn't bother. They never came out. You know, came one or two, but nothing like it is today. And I don't see with it because I'm not there that much anymore, you know, but I see sometimes somebody makes a film and puts it on a computer. It's unbelievable the amount of surfers that are here. And they just do what they want, as everybody else says. You know, they got one part, now they want the north side, and they ride that on the... You get the southeast there. They love that because you get them big rolls that come in from the outer ocean and they roll right past the light and all the way down the North Bar. That's what they like because they get on them and ride them for a long distance. I mean, they don't care if you're there fishing, you know.
Surfers out there? Watch. Lead on surfer. Watch. Let's chew them up. Look. Bite their head off. Look.
But all is not perfect in this surfer's paradise. With the beaches already overcrowded by the fishermen themselves, and the competition for the best spots already getting out of hand, the addition of hundreds of surfers was not welcomed by all.
What if I'm out here fishing, that girl rides into a treble hook? That's one heck of a fight, and I can't weigh her in. Yeah.
Everybody likes fishing the bars. They like the bars because that's where you get the surf. The surf casters like the surf because that's where the fish hang out. So it's going to be 6 in one and half a dozen in the other one. It's going to be a fight.
As it sits now, the rules state that there is no surfing on the north side. The south side, from what I understand, was supposed to be an experimental. No, I don't want to say an experimental, but it was supposed to be a, yeah, experimental is what I would call it, to see if the two groups could work together. And it seems to have worked pretty much. But surfing on the north side is kind of silly for a lot of reasons. You know, the surfers always say it's too rough to fish when the conditions are right for them to surf, and nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, I can't tell you how many of us run to the north side when conditions look like you couldn't even stand up in some of this surf. And that's when the fishing is pretty much the hottest.
You know, Montauk is a surf fishing town, and some of those where you get those good breaks, you know, are standard surf fishing spots. Again, the deference should go to the surf caster in those situations.
The problem on the north side, more than any other place, is the waves come in at an angle. So they get swept, even if they start way out, they get swept into the shore. And they move at such speed, you're going to hook them. They go across the line, they drag the lure to themselves. You don't even have to cast at them. They'll grab it with their board and it pulls up, they'll pull it for you.
I don't want to mess with them, and they don't want to mess with me. Some of them are my friends. But I did cast it one. And then later on, I found out that he was a friend of mine. Well, not a friend, but someone I know. And he goes, "What are you aiming for me?" I said, "No, I was aiming next to you because I could have hit you." He goes, "I was stuck that day. I was stranded." So, well, you were stranded in the wrong spot. Needless to say, we still talk.
Well, I personally hooked one, more than one in the same day. It wasn't my fault. I cast it, and then they come with such speed you can't reel it in fast enough. You can't get at it if you wanted to. You can't. And they got to learn to realize this. There's certain places where they can surf and certain places where they can't. And this is one of the conditions they can't. And the state has acknowledged this. They cannot have the two at the same time there. Oh, it's a safety issue. They've been told us. They've been told us at various meetings. Some of them are kind of obstinate about it, but unfortunately, this is the conclusion that's been reached. Fortunately for us, because we could still fish. We have a right to fish.
We never had that much trouble with them, even when they were around, because it's all there in the day. We didn't do much in the day. But they sure did, you know, and they'd ride right through the guys fishing. You know. A lot of yelling and screaming.
That's why you got to fish at night. No crowds. Why do we do what we do? You know, why do we get up in the middle of the night, sleep deprived? You know, I think because, you know, we don't really know what's going on in our brains. We just do it. It's in your blood. It's more enjoyable at night, less people. You know, fishing at night, you know, you get a little more tranquility. Is that the word? You get a little bit more alone time. And, you know, it's not people on top of you.
To really catch the big fish, to really hunt the cow, you know, a lot of that, if you're gonna hunt them and not get lucky, you know, that's a physical game. That's a middle of the night. That's a wetsuit. That's swimming to a rock. You know, that's getting, you know, pounded by waves in the dark.
Middle of the night, hiking down those boulders, nothing around. It could creep the hell out of you. And it takes a lot of tolerance to get used to it. I mean, I'm still getting concerned. I see something up in the sky, see some lights, mind starts playing tricks on you, especially with the new moon, with a starry night. You know, I'm scared of my own shadow, scared of a little creek behind me.
One night, as soon as I left Ditch Plains, I stepped on something, and when I stepped on it, it hit me in the back, and it knocked me down, and all my equipment went in the ground. And what I stepped on was the skeleton of a deer. I guess you would say the rib cage. And I stepped on one side, and the other side hit me in the back.
We liked that false bar, north bar, the outer bar. When we got onto that, that was a great place. We never went out there in the day, never went out there anytime anybody could see how you got out there. We just waited to get out, you know, certain like a little path off the north bar and got out there. And if you didn't walk on this narrow path as wide as this rug, you were off. And it was 10, 12-foot water, so that's deep, you know. If you were just, you know, you couldn't go out there without a suit. It was strictly a suit, no waders, because you had to get into deep going. Water this deep, well, maybe up to your neck, and then come up again, you know. So you couldn't go in waders, you know. But it was a half a dozen guys. We used to fish that same crew every night, you know.
Prior to the widespread adoption of fishing waders in the early 20th century, surf anglers in the Northeast would often fish from purpose-built bass stands, which extended out and over the pounding surf to where the big cows lurked. They would chum the waters around their stands with crushed lobsters, reserving the succulent tails for use as bait. As wader use became more widespread, anglers were able to access previously unfished spots. A growing desire amongst the boldest anglers to get closer to their quarry led some to exchange their waders for wetsuits. No one is quite sure who was the first to push this frontier, but few doubt that the wetsuit was first used as a fishing tool in Montauk.
I knew a guy, John Thomas, who, if he's alive today, has got to be about 97 years old. And he used to show me pictures of himself in a wetsuit from probably what looked like from the photographs the late 50s to the early 60s. So I know there was, you know, a lot of guys taking pretty drastic measures to take fish at that time. It didn't just start like in the late 60s and the early 70s. It was around before then, certainly, because I've seen the photographs.
I saw one or two guys with wetsuits on going beyond the breakers, and I knew that was for me. The one mentor, if you want to call him a mentor, that I had was Jack Yee. Jack actually took me to a custom place to get my first wetsuit, and he took me over to Evans Rock in the middle of the summer. It was about 110 degrees out, and he taught me how to wetsuit and how to get to these various boulders.
I had no choice to get into a wetsuit.
I was fishing Jones's Reef one late night. I had a nice fish on, and I had these three guys walk out in front of me. They just came in the water, walked out in front of me, and I felt my line cross these guys, and poof, I lost the fish. I was so damn pissed. I went out that morning, and I bought a wetsuit, booties, and I was going to buy Mae West and the whole 9 yards, and so I geared up, and I started walking out, and I had an 11-foot stick, and I was trying to bury the stick in there and get on. I had my hands on a rock, but I must have swallowed half the fucking ocean. And then all of a sudden I got caught in a rip, and I started riding the rip towards where Weak Fish Rock. I hit it dead center, and I got up, and I almost fell off the rock. So I put on a pencil popper. I make one cast, and I'm working the pencil popper, and there's a big explosion right on the plug. Fish hit the plug, and it went down. And I came back on it, and it ran, and it ran. And I says, holy shit, this is some fish. The fish was a 35-pounder, but then again, that was still a nice fish for, what, actually 2 casts? So that was my first experience with a wetsuit. But I basically, then all I would do is swim rocks all day long. So I would be prepared to go to these rocks at any time.
He was on Weak Fish one time in a dark night, like a new moon when it's pitch black, and he heard a small boat out there. And the Chinaman was like that, and he had a suit on, and he grabbed a handful of seaweed that was floating by. When the boat got close to him, he put the seaweed over his head, was all hanging, and he had a cigarette in his mouth, and he asked the guy, you got a match? And he said, the 2 guys screamed like, holy shit, they're bloody murder. See a damn small Chinaman standing on a rock in the middle of the ocean. When I get a picture of what it looked like. I was on it a million times. Any guys our size, that wave hit you. No matter what you did, it adds a lot to hit, and it'd just push you right off. Not even a wave, it would just be the roll. The roll would come along and just pick you off the rock and push you off, and it was a pain in the ass to get back on it. But the Chinaman, he'd go, you know, you'd see these big rollers coming in, because they fish there in the daytime, too. Be watching them with their glasses. Oh, it's going now. The wave would go by, he'd still be standing there. He used to tell me put nails in through his feet to stay on a rock. He was good fisherman. Him and Bragan were good. They caught a lot of fish, you know.
Hanging out with Jack a little bit and seeing some of the things and hearing some of the stories, it was a big help in terms of, you know, moving on and being able to do the things I do today. Jack, it's everything I ever learned from you. Especially peeing in my wetsuit.
That's the best part of it.
That keeps you warm.
Yeah, that's right.
Wait till you get a wetsuit and put it on your first pair of waders. You can be casting there and you go, ah.
My waders, yeah, thank you very much.
Nice.
When I first started, there was only about 10 or 12 of us that used the suit. And we had Montauk pretty much to ourselves. I fished from under the light with the suit. Almost every spot in Montauk, I fished with the suit, mostly on the north side. Most of the time, the more you're into the rip, the better you're gonna do. There were times when I fished the suit years ago when the guys on the beach were standing pretty much on the shore, didn't do nothing, and I was getting fish like every 3rd cast. It's being in where they are a lot and getting where they are.
See, at that time, we didn't have installation in our wetsuit. It was all rubber. And to get in back and forth, to get into a wetsuit and the whole thing, we used to wear pantyhose. And you try and go into a store and you're buying pantyhoses, you know, medium, large. You wear it one time and your toes would make runs and the whole thing. But my biggest fear was getting hurt and going to the hospital and them taking off my wetsuit and they see me in pantyhose.
There's nothing better than wetsuit fishing in Montauk. You start wearing that wetsuit, you get comfortable being out in the water. You know, I love to just get knocked around. You don't have to worry about, you know, getting your waders filling up with water. You know, and honestly, I think you catch more fish just because you got the ability to get out a little further. I think the best thing about a wetsuit fishing is you got less people to worry about. Because where you can fish, there are less people trying to fish that spot.
Getting a little older, I'm wearing a dry suit, a 7mm dry suit. And I have to say, it's like a lem. I put that thing on, you could fish into December, and you're just not uncomfortable anymore. You know, the only issue is, and it's a pretty funny story, is the first time I got my dry suit, I fished one whole tide in a wetsuit, and even though I don't like to do it, the nice thing is if there's fish and you're fishing and you have to relieve yourself, you can. So I get a couple hours sleep and I put on my new dry suit and I'm loving this thing. I get out on a rock and I'm fishing, a couple of nice fish, and I say, you know what? I'm gonna go. I start going, it was like, oh, right in my new dry suit. Man, what a loser.
I tell guys, you know, you should get yourself a wetsuit only for the safety of it. You go out in the water here in waders, if you fall, you're gonna fill up with waders. You gotta remember this here. Marvin Woolman, I pulled his body out of the water because he drowned on the False Bar area. He was laying face down by the entrance. This guy Teddy and I, we walked out in the water, we pulled him in. I didn't even know it was Marvin. I turned him over. He was all gray.
The wetsuit is the way to go because if you get in trouble, you can always drop everything and swim. Where the waders, you can't do that. But the wetsuit gives you that little bit more of, try to use the correct word, whatever. You know, gives you more pagoozis to go that extra 10 feet, which could be more trouble than it's actually worth.
One night we were fishing in North Bar, and we pulled a wetsuiter out of the water because he got swept off that that bar in Clark's Cove in the middle of the night, and he actually got his hooks from his surf bag got caught under his arm, so his arm was pinned, and he had a lot of trouble swimming. So by the time he came, we got him back to the beach, he was pretty much exhausted. So absolutely, I think it's safety, but just like anything else, you gotta, make sure all the pieces are working together.
But swimming to a rock isn't surf casting. I don't care what anybody says. If you can't walk to the rock and you got to swim to a rock, then you're gonna get dropped off on a boat. It's not surf casting.
Wetsuit?
No wetsuit.
I don't wear a wetsuit.
Why?
Waders. I don't think I've ever in my life put a wetsuit on to go fishing. Never. When I'm in back of a guy 50 feet behind him, he's on a wetsuit and I'm casting farther than him, I don't need a wetsuit.
I was out there one night. It was a very calm night. It was a moonlit night. And I cast out an eel pretty far out. And all of a sudden, I just saw this big grayish-brown body just working its way right into me. And it's just amazing. Rather than say shark or have a fear, the first thing I did was I lifted my pole up with the butt, and I pointed the tip of the butt toward this animal that's coming in at me. And my luck, he just went when he got close to me, I don't know, maybe he saw my legs or something, he just veered off. And after I saw it, I put the rod down and I said, wow, that was a shark.
I was always leery of that too, because say you had a stringer with some fish, stripe or anything on there, and a blue shark comes along. Now, he ain't gonna bite you, they're not man-eaters, but he goes for them bluefish or whatever, and he hits your leg. He was got his mouth open to, you know, if the fish were on a string and they happen to, the tides hold them against your leg, say. He comes up and sees them and he grabs part of your leg. Now, his teeth are in your leg. He ain't trying to kill you, but he's got a hold of you. He ain't gonna drown you, but he's gonna put a hurting on you.
Hopefully, you know, in my own mind, I'm hoping that I'm not gonna die in a bed riddled with cancer. But I'd like to get eaten by a shark, to tell you the truth. I think that'd be a good way to go.
Well, I'm gone. Yeah, I'm gone. The woman I got a heart of stone. 'Cause she used me like a dove, control it all, even when I fall.
Skishing is sort of an eccentric way that I developed to catch these fish. Essentially what I do is I put on a wetsuit and flippers, and I bring along my tackle, rod and reel, and I swim out, say 200 or 300 yards into the ocean. And fish with a live eel, generally, to catch very big fish. And once you hook them, they like to tow you all over the place. It's rewarding in that it's man against the beast.
Look at that! It's bigger than yours!
The animal actually has a chance to drown you as well as you have a chance to drown it.
Let's do it!
The biggest, I wouldn't call it fish, but the biggest hit I had last year was putting an eel into a skisher. I hooked one of those guys, and fortunately he yelled out, and I didn't set the hook.
So I started playing around with this thing just before the tournament, the Montauk Locals tournament of 1996. And the members of the tournament committee, who were all my best buddies, didn't like the idea of the way I was catching fish because I was swimming out to these big rocks. All summer, I was swimming again to Weakfish Rock and catching these huge bass. And when no one else could catch a thing, because you just can't target that area with a boat because you're right in the middle of the rocks, and you can't target it from the beach because it's just too far away. And so to tease these guys, I'd catch these fish and pick them up in the air and throw them at them. Say, hey, here's one for you, you asshole. And thus, my buddies all got bees in their bonnets about the way I was fishing. And now they're all paranoid that I'm gonna win the tournament by swimming out to this rock. You see, because they can't do that, because they don't have the testicular fortitude. So they got it in their mind that somehow I was cheating by doing this, to an extent where they started talking amongst themselves and having little private conversations. So the Montauk Locals Tournament Committee decided that what I was doing was illegal, and they changed the rules of the tournament a week into the tournament. And so that sort of irked me. So I started doing everything in my power to fish in ways that they hadn't made illegal. And the next day I got a nice letter that said, "Dear Mr. Melnick, we can see that you're not the sort of person that can participate in our little event. You're not a team player, and we're going to make an exception, then here's your $200 back. At which point I decided I really had to piss them off from then on, so I started swimming in front of them and catching their big fish during the tournament. And that's basically how skishing was born.
You know, anybody that puts their life in jeopardy to do that for fishing is wrong. One of them should get bitten in half by a shark. Not that I want that to happen to really anybody, but that's just, it could be fun. And there's many people that done it way before Melnick done it. Only Melnick wants to be recognized. So he does it during the day where people can see him. Been people 20 years ago doing that don't tell anybody because they catch fish and they keep it quiet. Paul, on the other hand, needs to tell everybody and whatever, you know what I mean? Whether he wants to make a business out of it or whatever. But that's a navigational boat hazard. You know what I mean? If he gets hit in the head with a boat, then he gets hit in the head with a boat.
You know, this fish that I caught last week, when I got knocked off the rock, he was still out about 30 yards.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find the rock again. And I'm trying to swim in, and this guy's trying to take me out in the middle of the ocean. That was,
yeah, without flippers, they pull pretty hard, don't they?
Yeah, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
What do you call that? A Montauk sleigh ride.
A Montauk sleigh ride.
A Montauk sleigh ride, yeah. A lot of fun out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of experience.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That's what makes Montauk different than any place else.
You know, every night out there is different.
It's a small little town, you know, and it's completely different. You can't catch stripers under the light in East Hampton. They don't have one. You know what I mean? That's why Montauk's Montauk, because it's the very end of the island. Anything around it's just an island. This is the point, and that's my point.
Now everybody fishing. Oh, everybody fishing. Oh, everybody fishing. Now everybody fishing. Oh, everybody fishing. We might well be some good. We fish in the river. We fish in the pond. I want to know what the hell going on. Oh, everybody fishing. Now everybody fishing. Everybody fishing might well be some good. I'm fishing the river, fishing in the lake. I want to tell me, baby, for goodness sake, no, everybody fishing. Everybody fishing. Everybody fishing might well be some good. All right, let's fish a while. Tell me, baby, what you gonna do? You can't catch all fish up, me and you. Now everybody fishing. Now everybody fishing. Oh, everybody fishing. We might well be too. All right, let's fish a while. Everybody fishing. Now everybody fishing. Now everybody fishing. Oh, everybody fishing. Now everybody fishing. We might well be some too. Now we fish in the river. We fish in the pond. I want to know what the hell going on. Oh, everybody fishing. Now everybody fishing.